Hey guys, I'm back with another episode of Mental Wealth. This podcast is used to express thoughts, experiences, and lessons. I aim to be as transparent as possible. If you enjoy an episode, please don't forget to like, comment, and tell a friend. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mental Wealth. In today's episode, I plan to do an autism awareness experience and just inform people about autism. On today's episode, we'll be interviewing my clinical supervisor, Tyeekia Blue. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be a part of the podcast and talk about something that means quite a lot to me, which is autism awareness.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. Do you care to give some background information on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Tyeekia. I am a licensed clinical social worker. Also have a background in addiction specialist as well. I have a private practice located in Harrisburg, North Carolina, which is right outside of Charlotte. I've been in that office for the past 4 years, and I started in the height of the pandemic, right before the pandemic started. And, we've been rocking and rolling ever since then. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I love to travel. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about me, but I'm very, very passionate about autism awareness. And I'm sure as Jamir begins to ask questions, you'll hear a lot about that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. So what brought us to do today's episode was in my county, in Greenville County, there was a child that went missing at school and they were later found dead. And this child was autistic. And so it just shows you that there's not enough resources. You drop your kids off at school with them alive and pick them up dead. So I mean, this is challenging for parents to navigate their child dealing with this. So, can you define autism?
Kind of define it. Maybe not so much so. So here's a disclaimer, right? I'm a mom of a child that has autism, right? And and I also am a mental health professional, right? So sometimes it is hard for me to find a way to talk about it clinically and then also talk about it, from a personal level as well. But basically, so here's a fun fact, right? So before I did have a child with autism, I actually was working with children with autism, doing in-home behavioral support for children. And then I began to be a case manager for Medicaid in my county, working also with families who had children with special needs, and not really knowing that essentially that was preparing me to become a mom of a child, with autism. So I don't claim to be an expert in the field. I just speak from my personal experience, having a child with autism, but it's a neurological disorder basically that, can obviously does affect the brain, right? And how a person, how their brain develops. And with autism, a lot of times, what you can see as far as like their behaviors. I mean, there's a lot of things that people say in regards to autism. I know I may be jumping all over the place, but most of the time people say things like autism is something that could be caused by vaccines and things like that. When in fact that's not true. It definitely is a can be looked at as something that happens genetically. In the case of my son, it's genetic, right? We did go, in fact, and did testing, right, to find out. So it's not something that's caused by, vaccines. But basically, with autism, like it is a repetitive. A lot of times, the characteristics that are displayed is like repetitive behaviors that individuals may display. They are very sensitive to their five senses, right? They're very sensitive to different noises, different tastes, and textures and the feels of things. Just all types of things. Is from my understanding, it just can like feel like what we see is nothing compared to what they see and what they experience. So, and it can affect like their communication. There could be like, individuals who have autism that may be considered to be nonverbal. It's a lot. I'll just say that.
Yes, ma'am. It seems like with autism, it's very important to find the diagnosis and interventions early, right?
Yeah, that's the key. Early intervention is key. So, like typically, like when you're going to your doctor, when you have a child and they go to the doctor, they'll start off going, when they're a newborn, then they'll start off going like every 3 months, every 6 months, and, yearly or whatever the case is. When they're asking you those questions about your child's developmental milestones, it's important to be very honest on those questionnaires, right? Because sometimes as parents, you're like, oh, they're fine. Sometimes they may do this, sometimes they may do that. But if you are open and honest on those questionnaires when you go see your pediatrician, like some of those developmental milestones that your child may not be meeting, like a neurotypical child, usually is one of the key characteristics of autism, especially like if they may have they're not saying their first words, and sometimes they do. There's such thing as like let's say for instance they may begin to speak, and then all of a sudden you notice that they're not speaking anymore, then sometimes that could be a characteristic of autism. So it is early intervention is key to get that diagnosis and to begin to get the ball rolling to get the services started.
And I've also learned from with autism there are different what spectrums that people can be on,
Oh
and how
yeah.
do these different spectrums vary?
So basically, like when I first learned of autism, there was a such thing as autism spectrum disorder, and then there was also what's considered to be Asperger's, right? Again, I'm not considering myself to be an expert. I'm a parent, so I'm speaking from a parent's perspective. But with it used to be that they were considered to be higher functioning, and autism, I guess was considered to be lower functioning. But in the last, I guess, 10 years or so, they've changed the diagnosis criteria, and now it's all autism spectrum disorder. So there is three different levels of autism, right? There is level one, which is, what you would consider to be someone who, could be verbal. They could present, like being able to be in a general ed classroom, being able to, you know, participate in, like a sport or whatever the case is, or they could, they just may have what's considered to be, they just may require support prompting, right? So you may find yourself noticing they have like rigid routines, or they may have certain aversions to food textures and things like that. So that's level one. Level two is requiring substantial support, right? So that could be someone who, may be verbal, but sometimes they may not. You kind of have to prompt them to say what it is that you need them to say, like, or you just may notice that they're more quiet or more reserved, right? They may still display a lot of the symptoms, of autism, but that's level two. Level three is what my son is. He requires, financial support, 24-hour supervision, cannot be left alone, does not has difficulty with eloping. And that can happen at any level. But yeah, my son is considered to have the most extreme case, right? So he is completely nonverbal. We have to have a safety device on him at all times to make sure that he, doesn't elope or run away or things like that. So there definitely is like, different levels. He only eats, certain foods, only like 3 or 4 foods to be exact. And he requires like services daily, and he's, in a special ed self-contained classroom.
It seems like families dealing with special needs would have more problems with insurance coverage. Do you care to explain that?
Yeah. So insurance coverage is really sad, like speaking from a parent perspective, we learned about my son's diagnosis when he was almost 3 years old, right? We noticed, he was not, you know, I happen to have some friends that, had their children around the same exact time as mine. And, we all like share videos, seeing pictures on Instagram and things like that. And I began to notice that, obviously, their children were talking, doing things differently. And, that was something that Princeton wasn't doing. And so when we took him to the doctor, we definitely expressed our concern. Hey, he's not talking. He's not really eating a lot of different foods. He's become fixated on, watching one particular show and, wanted to rewind it to one particular, section of the show and repeat it over and over and over again. And he's constantly always trying to climb on things and, trying to escape and things like that. So when we expressed that concern, to the doctor, they did get, help us to get tested, right? And so with insurance, right, I did find myself trying to, find out what insurance would help us to be able to get the services that we needed. Once he had the diagnosis, we had to, immediately get him into what he was referred to occupational therapy, and he was referred to speech. And those things are very, very expensive, especially if you have commercial insurance, right? And then there's a session called ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, and some insurance doesn't cover it at all. And so, and then sometimes people will try to apply for Medicaid, but we are a family of two, and due to income, like us making more than the amount that they allow, we did not qualify for Medicaid. And so that was really difficult. So for the first couple of years of Princeton being in ABA, because he was in it for 2 years the first time he did it, we used our commercial insurance, and it was very, very expensive. It's about, I think, about $400 or $500 a day, something like that, for therapy out of pocket. And we had to be on a wait list, to even get the therapy. But yeah, we had to use commercial insurance. And, thankfully we were able to find a plan that, helped cover it. But it's something that has to be pre-authorized, and every like 6 months or so, insurance will have to reauthorize it. And at any given time, they could say that they're not covering it, or it doesn't, or he doesn't meet the necessity for it. So finding insurance is hard, especially if you are a working class, family, and you don't qualify for Medicaid. You'll have to find an insurance plan that will cover it. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for parents having to navigate this?
So every state is different. That's the hard part. I know, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I happened to work initially for Medicaid in our state. So I happen to know the Medicaid plan like the back of my hand, and I happen to know the qualifications very, very well. And so that helped me to be able to navigate differently than someone else, right? So in the state of North Carolina, right, like sometimes they do have like special needs insurance that you can apply for, and sometimes the income doesn't, they don't look at the parent's income for that individual to qualify, but it's on a state to state basis, right? And so, unfortunately, with some parents, and I've heard of parents doing this, right? They may not work their full time job anymore so that they can get their kid to be on insurance. And that's so unfortunate, right? That you have to do that, because it's not like something, it's not a pre existing like condition, it's something that, that happened that you have no control over. So, but anyway, so that's one thing. Like in the state of North Carolina, we have something called managed care organizations, and you can call the managed care organization and, ask to speak with someone who works with intellectual disabilities or autism spectrum disorder. And usually they can have a case coordinator, and they can guide you and let you know what you should do to, help see if your child qualifies for that type of insurance. And if you do happen to have commercial insurance, any one of them, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, any of them, right? You can also call your insurance company and tell them that you need to speak with someone who works with individuals with special needs, and ask them for a care coordinator, case coordinator, one of those things, one of those words, case manager. And usually the case manager, all insurance companies have case managers that work with behavioral health and special needs, and they can usually point you in a direction of resources as well. So my advice to you would be to call Medicaid in your state, ask to speak with someone in that area, or call your commercial insurance plan and ask to speak with a case manager, and they will connect you. Some people just don't know that they exist.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. A lot of information. Yeah.
Does the Affordable Care Act have any impact on this? What about current legislation? How does it impact the insurance coverage for autism?
That's a great question. So, the Affordable Care Act. So, from my personal experience, as I was transitioning from working full time into working, for my practice, full time, so self employed, right? That meant that I was no longer full time employed. I was able to go into the Affordable Care Act platform, healthcare.gov, go in and, see if we would qualify then, right? After losing commercial coverage. And, for me, it it worked where I was able to go in, put our information in, and because so there's another thing called the innovations waiver in the state of North Carolina, and each county has a wait list. In the county in which I'm in, there's a 10-year list. What the innovations waiver is essentially it is Medicaid for it's like enhanced Medicaid for individuals who have special needs, but the wait list is 10 years. But the enhanced Medicaid is lifelong. So once they get
Hmm.
on that wait list and then their turn comes up, they will have these services for the rest of their life. They will have services. As a matter of fact, I literally just got this in mail. They will have services such as respite care, supported employment. They'll have individual placement services. They could live in a group home. They can have community
Uh,
transition services. They can have, it's like the services are endless. They can have vehicle modification services, home modification services. In some states, the waiver will pay almost up to $135,000 per year for that person. So that's why the wait list is so long.
uh,
And so my son is on that wait list. The moment that we found out he had autism, I called and put him on that wait list. And so because he was already on the wait list, somewhere in the insurance world, his name is already in there as he has autism, right? And so once I went on to the website and I put his information in there, he actually did, because I lost insurance coverage, he actually did qualify for special needs Medicaid, right? He is still on the wait list for the enhanced Medicaid. However, he does have special needs Medicaid that currently covers his ABA services 100% that he has now. Any other service that we would choose to get for him, but he won't. It's going to take a while before he gets that enhanced Medicaid service, and that's okay because right now all he needs is ABA. So there are ways to work through it, and again, it's best to talk with someone at your insurance company at your state level that can help you navigate. It is a lot of paperwork. You have to do like interviews and all stuff. It is quite a lot, and most parents just don't know where to start, so they just sometimes feel frozen, feel stuck, and sometimes just don't do anything. Yeah.
um, yeah, I can definitely understand how parents can get caught up and paralyzed with just everything, just from what you
Mm-hmm.
just shared with me. I'm like, if I had a child with
Yeah.
autism, at least I have this episode to go back to and know what to do.
Right. And I'm always willing to help. So if you have questions, I will help you. I will guide you. I have a whole list of resources all over 10 people. And it can all be a lot. My advice would be just taking everything one step at a time, one day at a time. If you need help, asking a family member or your support system, to try to help you as well. So you don't have to feel like you're doing it all alone. Again, my advantage was that I happen to have been educated about all these services. And the moment that I found out my son had autism, I hit the ground running.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Do you have any final words for the audience?
Thank Well, there's always a lot to talk about, but just because the individual has autism does not mean that they are not able or capable of doing the same things as a child, right? So they are like my son has a speaking device, right? So he uses a device to be able to say what he wants all the time. He wants yogurt, he'll say, I want yogurt, I want this, I want that. And so that is also something that could be covered under insurance. So just because, like, let's say for instance, you feel like you hit a brick wall or you don't know which way to turn, just reach out for help. Know that you're not alone. In my area, there is like Autism Society. So you can go to their website, you can reach out to them. They have advocates there that can help you. So just go on to Google and type in resources for autism in your county, and I can guarantee you there are a lot of resources. You're not alone. So that would be my advice, is just to let people know, take it one step at a time, ask for help. Google is your best friend, where you can go online and look for the resources in your area. The resources are there. Unfortunately, they're not, you do have to go search and look for them, but there are moms all over social media who are just as passionate about autism as I am. And usually they always have a lot of resources on their page too. You're not alone. That would be my advice.
Yes, ma'am. I greatly appreciate this. If you
Of
enjoyed
course,
today's
yeah.
episode, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be back with you for another piece.